My name is Ajamal Binding. I'm the chair of the board of Movement Omaha for Race Equity, and our group deals with anti-racism issues in our community, as well as accountability and transparency. And again, we know that there are a lot of issues that affect our community. And so one of the things that our organization is about is education, advocacy, and getting people more involved in dealing with anti-racism. We are probably one of the only organizations in the state that has that in our mission statement and work on that. So today we have a special guest with us today. Every 2 years, we have an event in Omaha called Native Omaha Days. This event originated many years ago from a woman who saw the vision help African Americans promote pride and, most important, to encourage individuals to living in other places to return back to Omaha. Well, it's kind of a community reunion. We call it an elaborate family reunion in a sense. Um, and again, it has made a difference in our community. And Kimberly C. Barnes, I've been knowing her for a number of years, has been able to talk more about this organization. She's the president chair of this organization, and she was able to talk more about what they do in our community in various social gatherings and so on. And many of these African Americans who participated in this group was very impressed with some things that she shared, as well as how Native American coming back together at Omaha Days have brought so many people from across the country because of us who grew up here have affinity for the city and so on. So first I want to start off by saying, Kimberly, welcome to Throwing Out Some Heavy Light and share a little bit more about you because I didn't say much about your background and so on. So give a little bit more about who you are.
Okay, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for taking the time to have this conversation about Native Omaha Days. As Ajamal mentioned, my name is Kimberly, middle initial C, Sherrod Barnes. I'm a native of Omaha, been here all my life. I'm a product of Omaha Public Schools, first generation college graduate. My passion is always been being an active member of my community. My layer to that passion is working in child welfare, which is my professional responsibility. I lead an organization, CASA for Douglas County, and we advocate for kids in the child welfare system. But along with that is me priding myself on being able to give back to my community, which is primarily North Omaha. Although I don't reside in North Omaha, my heart is in North Omaha and forever will be. So that is what I will always consider to be my community.
Well,
So.
kind of a little joke. I tell people I live in North Omaha, Northwest Omaha, but still North Omaha. But some of us may live in different houses everywhere, but we have that affinity to help give back and work in the communities that we grew up in, particularly the near North Side. I want to start,
Absolutely.
I want to start off, Kimberly, because I remember I'm talking about the presentation you made at
Mm-hmm.
the Great Plains Black Museum. You outlined the founder and the backstory of how this event evolved. Can you share a little bit more of that with this audience?
Absolutely. So Native Omaha Days has was birthed by two legacy trailblazers that are no longer with us, Miss Benny McDonald and Miss Vera Johnson, who are the founders of Native Omaha Days and the Native Omahans Club. In 1976, in October, they started organizing what we now celebrate, even now in 2025, as what we call Native Omaha Days. And that's a biannual event that happens for a week. And so these two women decided after visiting California and finding out there were some natives there and they would celebrate that they would bring that same idea back to Omaha, but to keep it in North Omaha, to maintain our roots, our cultural identity, and to celebrate those that have left and then come back and reunite with some of those same exciting moments they had on 24th Street or 16th Street or wherever in North Omaha they lived. And so it's a celebration in that vein of celebrating each other.
Mm. I have relatives who live out of town. They plan to attend and have been here. They plan an annual vacation back to Omaha so they can meet the old classmates as well as high school people, college, and
Mm-hmm,
just people
mm-hmm,
from our neighborhoods that we grew up in.
mm-hmm,
Do
mm-hmm.
you have an evaluation or survey of that participants share feedback with the coordinator, your committee of your board or whoever? Do you have any kind of feedback on how you qualify or what do you evaluate your program?
So how we evaluate? Well, we started in 2023. We did a community survey asking what events they attended, what did they like, what didn't they like, what they would change. And by way of that survey, we reintroduced back the Native Omaha Days. So we do a survey at the conclusion of our signature events, and we ask that those questions and find out what are we missing, and then most importantly, what did you like? Um, Oftentimes we like to lean into the negative and build from there, but also you want to lean into the positive and make it better. And so that's one of the things we do is just ask a survey at the post of all of our events. And we look at that data and determine what the next, Native Omaha Days will look like based off of that evaluation.
Mhm. Now, there is a little confusion about another organization. I heard that for the first time in the
Mm-hmm.
presentation. They received
Mm-hmm.
money for this event, but there's a separate. They're separate from your group without throwing out a lot of shade at them, which I may be known to do that sometime.
Yeah.
What is that conflict about, and can Black folks get along? Is another question. In other words, would mediation help solve this two group conflict or issue that's going on? Talk to me about
Right.
that one.
Okay. So, I really enjoy getting that question because I am not the author of confusion and I want to make sure it's very clear what the Native Omahans Club is. And so there is another entity and they call themselves the Native Omaha Days Organizing Committee. And I do have to give them some respect simply because at the inception, when the Native Omahans Club membership dwindled a little bit, we needed some support. And at that time, I wasn't a member. And so the Native Omaha Club members at that time selected certainly community individuals to come in and help. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been a Native Omaha Days in 2015. So by way of this now call themselves the organizing committee, they lent their efforts to make sure that we would not, fall into a situation where there wouldn't be any Omaha Days. So once the Native Omaha Club, we're back up and going as if our founders would like us to be. We have donors, we have support, and the organized committee is still intact. However, there are two separate entities. We get no financial gains from their efforts or anything they do during Omaha Days. We are a standalone organization, a membership organization, a 501c3 organization. And so we act as our own fiscal agent because we have the proper tax exempt status. And so that particular entity was supposed to or should be focusing on the infrastructure, which is the safety of 24th Street during Omaha Days and the cleanup. Anything other than that is not what they should be doing. However, they are continuing to work alongside us, which makes it a little bit better that we can work together and make sure that Omaha Days is celebrated as it should be by way of our founders. So two separate entities. We operate. We're a 501c3 organization, membership organization, the Native Omaha Club. We are the legacy organization. We were founded by our founders, and then the organizing committee stepped in to support the Native Omaha's Club, like I mentioned, when membership did dwindle. But now we're trying to figure out how we can make it work. And so the answer to your latter part of your question is I would love to continue to have conversation so that there isn't a confusion in our community about who is the legacy organization, whom should we support in terms of donor dollars. And I would have to say, because I am a member of the Native Omaha's Club, we are the legacy organization. The majority of the support should come to the Native Omaha's Club because without us, Native Omaha Days would not exist. And I say that very transparently and very matter of fact.
As you mentioned that when I ran the Omaha Table Talk program and we got money from, I think the Sherwood Foundation, one of the challenges we faced is that they basically said we didn't have to become a nonprofit, but we also had a problem getting grants from other entities because we didn't have the 501c3. So when we got it, we didn't necessarily continue because of some personality and other political issues. But one of the things that's very important, people want to find out if you registered as a nonprofit for tax exempt numbers to make sure you got some oversight that you're not doing some strange things. So some organizations I remember the time the Omaha Community Foundation allowed us to go underneath them. But again, for some organizations, that's not good enough. They need their own 501c3. Also, they have a board of directors who can help make them accountable versus some ragtime group that just kind of floats out here and hustles money and don't have any sense of accountability in terms of money and transparency.
Absolutely.
Those are
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna switch up and ask you kind of a different question. When
Okay.
you were doing a presentation a few weeks ago, you raised the issue of other entities holding that who are participating in the other events in the community. And we're not talking just about this other group, but in general. And I noticed that in the newspaper in different places, people capture this concept of they've all day to make a profit on whatever they're doing and so on and so on. The
Mm-hmm.
question is, you implied they should consult with you before holding their major events. Can you expand on that concept?
Right. So when Native Omaha Days began and the Native Omahans Club started pushing this out by way of the legacy and founders, it's my understanding in historical context, before you can even mention Native Omaha Days in any type of verbiage related to the celebratory week, you had to get approval from the Native Omahans Club. And so that was a respect factor, right? Back then, there was respect. The elders knew, we knew, everyone knew if you were going to brand something Native Omaha Days, you had to go through the Native Omahans Club. And I think that's due, right? We are a legacy organization, and don't use our title if, in fact, you haven't consulted with, the foundational organization. And so we're looking to see how we can best communicate that to the community so that it can be a sanctioned Native Omaha Days event. And then they have to think about it as well. When you do that, you have the ability to garner what you may need to get additional support from stakeholders or donors because you've partnered with an organization that can theoretically get you more exposure if you are in fact looking to gain some capital during Omaha Days, and which we want, us to do during that week of celebration.
As you mentioned that, something came to mind when we were doing Omaha Table Talk. We registered the name with the state of Nebraska, kind of like a copyright thing, so that nobody could use the term Omaha Table Talk. So later on, when I was no longer with the organization, people wanted to use the concept table talk. I know at one point Cynthia Robinson of Black Studies want to have Black Studies Table Talk. And we caught a little drama from Maggie Woods. And I say all this publicly because it was public. And again, the issue I was arguing with is you don't have a corner of the word table talk. Now, again,
Right.
I'm on table talk, and she was talking about this proprietary name that they raise fund. This is Maggie and me talking. And I
Correct.
understood that. But what I couldn't get across here is that you can't control the word table talk, and people can adapt anything. Like we adapted a program from Dallas Dinner. And again, we didn't use their term because it was an Omaha. But you got to be careful when you try to hijack a common phrase that if it's not registered, you don't own it. And again, I didn't fall for the okey doke, but I do know ladies ended up using another term or whatever. But the point, and again, one of the sad things about that, we got to know how to walk that line. But let me stop and get back to another question
Right.
because it's your show and you're the
Yep.
guest and so on. One of the things we ask nonprofit directors or community organization, what is your budget? Okay. How many members are part of your entity? Can you share a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so we currently have 18 members. As I mentioned earlier, we are a membership organization. So today we have 18 members. Our budget right now is about 30,000,
Oh, wow.
and that seems like it's not enough, but it because we are a legacy organization. But again, as I mentioned earlier, we did fall in membership. Visibility was down. COVID hit. All the things, and so now we're able to have these conversations again to start getting that support financially from all the stakeholders that are invested in North Omaha.
What's fascinating is how you do so much with so little. Our budget is probably around 20,000. For years, we were just at 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
One time I was in a meeting with Marianne Bergerson and some other functionaries in Douglas County, and they were shocked because they do all these meetings we do. So no, we have a working board. We don't have paid staff, but
Correct.
people can do a lot more with small budgets. And sometimes think, if you had a budget of $1 million,
Mm-hmm.
other entities, because people, you guys are a lot of volunteers, and most
Yeah.
organizations, board members don't get paid. So I just find it
Mm-mm.
fascinating. Some organizations who are small and nimble can do more than some of these larger organizations who get millions of dollars and little accountability. But let me switch
Yes.
again.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
As we focus on African American community and Black folks who are ignored by many nonprofits and education institutions in Omaha, are other racial groups allowed to participate in this Native Omaha event?
Oh, absolutely. We are not an exclusive, it's not an exclusive event. It is inclusive to those who want to celebrate. However, the intent is for the celebration to happen. Invite whomever you want, whoever wants to come and have a good, fun, safe time. Omaha Days is it for you. The impact is our cultural identity, so we can share that with those who are not of our community. Again, we want to talk about why Omaha Days exist. Those conversations need to be had because we don't want it to just be the perception of come and kick it on 24th Street, go to this location. But there's a reason why we do it. And I think that's important to share, which is why we're not exclusive to anyone, coming to the event. We want anyone to come and have a good time.
Now, Kimberly, if I remember right, in your other presentation, you alluded to a series of events on certain nights. So, in
Mm-hmm.
other words, there's a schedule and location. So, how would somebody get that? Because I did ask you that question, but I wanted to figure if you could share this with the audience. How would they know how to find out what's going on a particular night or day, whatever you do the event?
Yeah. So you can go on our website, which is nativeomahaclub.org. That's one way to find information regarding our signature events and any other pertinent information related to the club. There is another website, is Native Omaha Days, and that website has a list of all of the events for those who have paid to be in the guidebook to have their information public, for those who come and visit. So those are two ways that you can find out. And the Native Omaha Days is the one that is managed by the organizing committee. And so they are the holders right now of all of the information that's beyond just the Native Omaha Club signature events.
So this is new to me. You said there's a guidebook that you pay to get in. How do you do that? Because I didn't know you had something like that. What does that mean?
Yeah. So that's the organizing committee. They have a guidebook. And in that guidebook, if you are an entity that's doing any type of event or a vendor, anything related to the know during Omaha Days, that guidebook would have all that information. And that's ran by the organizing committee.
And
And they
and how do you get that on the website, or you pick it up? Where do you get it from?
so you can go to their website, the Native Omaha Days website, and then it should be, there's a link for the parade because they're also the orchestrators of the parade. They also are the orchestrators for vendor opportunities, and they're the orchestrators of the guidebook and making sure the information is in the guidebook.
Now, being somewhat naive, when you say vendors opportunity, is that like businesses set up on the street or people selling things?
Yes, anyone who's selling anything, and if you are a food truck vendor, that information is on there as well because they have to follow the Department of Health, guidelines.
Now, you use the word parade. That's a new one to me. Is there an actual day for a parade like the Juneteenth?
Yes, the actual parade is Saturday, August 2nd from 30th and Lake to 30th and Sprague.
Okay, got you. Okay, good.
Mhm.
Now, as a lifelong resident of this community, I witnessed Omaha Police Department have been heavy-handed with some of our past community events, and I know a couple of them because I was attending the 360 meeting back in the day, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and I saw some of that. And during the Juneteenth parade years ago, they redirected the parade from 24th and Lake Street area to 30th Street. It was a whole different environment and so on, which took some fizz out of the event. So,
Mhm.
do you work with law enforcement? Are they as difficult to work with as many of our community perceive them to be?
So I can say during the planning meetings, all of those law enforcement officials who have come from the Northeast precinct they've been great to work with. They
Okay,
listen, um, they lean in where necessary to say what they feel would be the best logistical, way to handle 24th Street because of the influx of individuals who come down. So I don't have anything ill to say about the Northeast precinct for those who have attended the planning
okay.
meetings.
So
Yeah, they
it's the local precinct in North Omaha that you're in a relationship with versus other
correct.
departments who maybe put some fizzles in some people's drizzle. Gotcha.
Correct. I can only speak for those from the Northeast precinct that have attended the planning meetings that have been led by the organized committee, and of course, the club is a part of that.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. By the way,
Mhm.
when I was at a meeting, now think I heard the NAACP say this as well as I think you alluded to it. There are sometimes people who are in the audience or in the crowd or whatever that help mitigate some of the negativity. I do know there was a year of people walking around with guns and cussing and putting on a show
Mhm.
and just being disrespectful to some of our family members in that. And
Mhm.
also there were some issues of misunderstanding. I understand that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or do you have kind of like volunteers who help with, I don't know if law enforcement or with this event so that you can mitigate somebody who wants to kind of go off or do something to upset the apple cart for all the people enjoying this event?
Yeah, so the organizing committee, they work with some of the respective organizations such as U-Turn in the Empowerment Network, and they have block captains that are supposed to surveillance 24th Street and intercept should anything occur, and law enforcement does not need to step in at that time. And so that's one layer of it. The second layer this year, the Native Omaha Club, we're introducing what's called community ambassadors. And Leo Lewis is leading that effort, and so he will be very key on how we can position ourselves as the club as well to provide that same layer of additional support from a community perspective and not having law enforcement so readily to jump in and dispel everything because we all know when that happens the first thing we think is going to be shut down and then it's a ripple effect, but having individuals from the community who know what's going on, who probably knows the uncle to the son or the daughter who's doing something that can't be perceived to be illegal or not law abiding, then we go and talk to them. Because that's how it was when I was growing up, going to Omaha Days. If you saw the police, it was end resort. But other than that, you pretty much knew if somebody said something to you that was elder, you moved yourself
Right.
immediately, and we have to get back to that.
And as you alluded to, and I think, and we talk about this, we got to understand there's a continuity of us having social capital and relationship amongst each other. The
Mm-hmm.
last thing you want to have is some bonehead. I learned that to learn from Franklin Thompson's word, bonehead, in
Mm-hmm.
public, but it goes and messes up for everybody else. Or
Mm-hmm.
the same thing happens sometime. I know there's some nightclubs or places that have alcohol. Somebody goes and
Mm-hmm.
get drunk, and next thing you know, there's some crazy incident,
Mm-hmm.
or either hurt or just making negativity on this important event. So that's
Mm-hmm.
now, the other thing I was going to ask you is, I'm a critic of many individual things that are celebratory, and sometimes I question their outcomes. I mean, again,
Mm-hmm.
party,
Mm-hmm.
everybody in town show up. You do Beyonce come to town, everybody's going to come out, wow, yeah. And,
Yeah.
my question is, what can you demonstrate in terms of economic or social values of African American as a result of Native Omaha Days?
So, it's interesting when people say, well, I have a critical lens on these outcomes and things that happen.
Wait, show
So,
me some love now. Don't diss me. I'm the host now. But okay, I can take it. I throw it out. I can take it. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. And I'm a data person. I believe that you got to start with some type of baseline for something to show improvement. So I get that. But for us in Omaha Days, while that is premier, we want people to get economic, capital from Native Omaha Days because we bring so much money. So that's the opportunity for our Black vendors to sell their goods, to be patronized by us, to ask the questions that we have. And the biggest thing for me is you said it earlier, it's the social capital. It's the richness of our heritage. If you don't get anything else, that's your premier outcome. And so many non-Black organizations work so hard to get that social capital. And we have it in us. So as soon as we engage with each other, love on each other, talk about back, and I'm gonna use my elementary school when we went to Belvedere, when we went to McMillan, and the best high school in America, Omaha North High School, and we love on each other, that's social capital. And then because of that, we may talk a little bit. We're gonna go see that food truck because he went to Northwest, or he went to Central. We're gonna love on him and we're gonna give him, our money or swipe our card. So to me, it's social capital first because it's our heritage, it's our culture, and we love on each other. That's what we've been taught to do, and I hope we get back to that holistically. And then the second layer to that is once I'm loving on you, I'm gonna make sure I give some, economic empowerment to those that are down here selling their t-shirts and their pork chop sandwich. I don't eat pork, but or their chicken sandwich or their fried fish or things like that. Then that's what you're going to get out of Omaha Days. And as I mentioned, there's so many outside individuals who want that, and we have to shake it up in a bottle and sell it to them. And so that's what Omaha Days is.
It's ironic you mentioned that because I started thinking about some of my encounters with people. I have this way of joking with people. And sometimes I'm not going to mention Costco, but I went through the line one time as you check out. And I said to the lady, man, where'd you get the fountain of youth? You look so young. And she started
Mm-hmm.
telling me how old she was in this. And sometimes we make a general comment to a stranger or somebody who's serving you. They don't hear that because they hear a lot of negativity. And I think sometimes we need to get off this negativity, throw some compliments to people. You're doing a good job. I appreciate how you handle it. And again,
Mm-hmm.
you make their day. And I'm gonna tell you, sometime you come into the store place, people look out for you.
Mm-hmm.
I mention my favorite stores, but they say, "Oh, we got something on sale there today. You want to know about it?"
Mm-hmm.
Because you have built a relationship with that
Yes.
cashier or that stranger, and you made their day. But I really think we got to do a bit more in that area because we got some crazy times, Kimberly, and we got to deal with.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that. We absolutely do have some crazy times. Yeah.
I just want to come back to something you said earlier. Why do we always go up to people when they're from Omaha and say, "What high school do you go to?" I noticed you say North High, and I'm saying Central, and we always do that. So is that a test of badge that you're really from here? Why do you go there?
We do. It's just that competitive nature of what high school was the best, right? You want to walk the best high school, there is. And in my mind, which is another thing, Native Omaha Club colors is North High colors almost. So, hey, it was destined for me. But you just be able to brag about your high school, and I'm a love. All high schools are great, but I just think Omaha North High, the Vikings are the best. So that,
Okay. Well, no, like I said, I never went there, so I was never in the building that often. So
yeah,
as
yeah,
they say, the person who eat the food is the best consumer of telling how good it is.
yeah.
And so again, I can't tell you what the food tastes in your mouth. So
Yeah,
we
yeah.
use these proverbs to drive home that point.
Right. And I mean, Central, they're great. Benson, Northwest, I know some great people. I have some a great circle of friends that unfortunately graduated from those high schools, but I love them all, and I think it's just all in competition, and then you get into the class war, But these are all conversations that happen during Omaha Days. I
Right,
mean,
you're right.
it
Right.
is, and we have it. Like Mr. Kenny Merritt is having an event, and it's called the Send Off, and it's class of '87 to 91 or 92, I believe, and you best believe everyone's gonna be watching. What high school do you represent at that event? So shout out to Kenny for sending that one for the going home event. So
One thing that we didn't talk about, if somebody wants to become a member of your group or volunteer, what are the prerequisites or steps required to do so?
yeah, so we do a membership informational in October, and once we have the date and the location, we'll make sure that that's visible on social media and our website. And you have to be recommended by a club member. And the reason why that's in place is it's a legacy organization, great pride in being, in my opinion, being a part of the Native Omahans Club. And we want to make sure the person wants to work. There's a lot of individuals that want to just be a part of something amazing. While we want that to happen, we also want you to work because we exist beyond Omaha Days. We do Palm Sunday. We do a scholarship. We do scholarships to graduating high school students. And then we do a Winter Wonderland, which is we give gifts to those and we've partnered with Girls Inc. the last couple of times on that. And so it's not just Omaha Days. Our founders were not just about that. They wanted to give back to their community. And so we want people that believe in that and want to work and do that. And there's a $150 membership fee associated with being a member that's due every year.
Before we open it up, I was going to ask throw one other question, a kind of a sidewinder. Is there other groups in other cities who do something similar to what we do in Omaha? Because I've never heard of this concept except here, but I haven't been to many other cities either.
Yeah. So LA still has one. I don't know how often they meet. Texas definitely has one. I think they do theirs every year. It's not a week. I think it's just a weekend. We're the only ones that do it the whole week, but there's other locations, like I mentioned, LA and Texas, who do it just for the weekend.
By the way, I saw a wonderful article. I don't know if I shared it with you or not, but it was in the Flatwater Press, one of those online newspapers. It said you're expecting 17. I think even the WWT picked it up. 17,000 people are expected to be at these events that you're doing.
Pretty close. I would love to get a real raw number. I really would. And the problem is we need to build around how we're going to capture that, the economic vitality of Omaha Days. So linking into these tourism locations and with Mr. Preston Love opening one in North Omaha, I think we'll be able to get a better number. But yeah, it's a pretty high amount of individuals that come back. It's really from Wednesday to Sunday is when they're here.
Years ago, I remember Brenda Council was pushing as an advocate that the Greater Omaha Chamber, as well as the Visitors Bureau, should do much more in North Omaha because they're outside of, we got the Malcolm X Foundation. There's some other great places and events in this community that people should come to as in that. So, are you working with any of these two entities in terms of publicity and helping to treat this as a signature event for us as Omahans in general?
Right. So that's our next layer. We had to get through. So Omaha Days, it's a truth telling serum. It's a truth. It really is. Once you get through something, you kind of figure out what we're missing. And because it's a legacy organization and we haven't evolved with the times, we're now there. Now we can start grabbing those things that are going to make it more, beneficial to bring back and show as a tourism spot for Omaha.
And the reason I say that because I know they got public funding they get from
Oh
different
yeah.
cities, Douglas County, you name it, and they
Mm-hmm.
share the love. And one of my criticism as an advocate and a person who deals with race issue is when our city is 35% people of color,
Mm-hmm.
name it, some of those funds and staff members and people should be representing our total community, not just the friends of the system or the patronists that we see in some other
Absolutely.
cities.
Absolutely.
We're
Yeah.
going to switch over before that. Do you have any comments before we open up to the participants and people like that who may be listening through Facebook Live or on our Zoom?
Yeah, so I just, again, Native Omaha Days is a culturally rich moment for us as, Black people that reside in North Omaha and have gone away to come back and celebrate each other, our accomplishments, even our North Omaha roots to see how far 24th Street has come with new development and connecting with old individuals. I just want everybody to have a safe and fun time. Patronize, the vendors, show them some love and then attend these events and have a good time. And if you're looking for a great event, of course, we're going to talk about the Native Omaha Days Homecoming Dance. That's on Saturday, August 2nd at Level Event Center on 102nd and Fort. And you can get that information on our website and purchase tickets for that event. It's $40 single, 75 couple. Bringing in a great a jazz violinist, Dominique Hammonds, and then DJ Riri from Miami, Florida, and Big Wade will be backing up the backup band for Dominique Hammonds. So it's going to be a great time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're up on that halfway mark and we throw it open to our participants. And I don't have access to seeing who's on Facebook per se. So, Andila, you may have to relay that to me if there's a question or comment. But you can talk directly to Kimberly at this point, and I just sit back and let you do that.
There any I can't see if there's questions. Are you waiting?
No, I'm like there's nothing coming through on our Zoom, but we
Okay.
also have Facebook Live, and that's where we sometimes get people who will raise questions, but it's off time relief. But in the meanwhile, I can throw another question. Got 20 zillions. I could ask you out of the top of my head. Um, what is your role with the academic community? Again, you have Black studies, you have people who are teachers, OPS, Black educators. Are they prominently figured in that? Do they do any of that? And I know some of them are from Omaha, but have you done anything in that area?
No, but that is definitely a lane we need to get into. And just having a conversation today at NCAP with some of the young adults there and talking about Native Omaha Days and how historical it is. And it ties back to the history of 24th Street, all the things. And so we are going to start pursuing how can we get into the educational realm to make sure that this is a part of history, especially when you talk about the developments of 24th Street and, why we call it the Deuce and why it's all the things that was so important to us as, Black people that lived in North Omaha. So
You know,
we're
I,
looking
I,
for
I
that.
read the book The Deuce. I found it fascinating. It's a different type of writing style that she has in there,
Mm-hmm.
more reminiscent, I can't say the word,
Yeah, reminiscent. Mm-hmm.
reminiscent our history. But again, at a certain age, and I think she's, in the same age range I am in, I remember some of those places. Now, one thing I don't remember, and I heard Brenda Council talk about it, was Reed ice cream. Again, Brenda's family might have been middle income. We were poor, so we couldn't afford ice cream. But I've heard my neighbor talk about Reed's ice cream, and there's some things in our community I didn't know because we were kind of like isolated family somewhat. But there's some things that we should all know about Omaha in terms of our culture when
Mm-hmm.
operating on 24th Street. So that book is fascinating. I do ask people who are Omahans to read that, particularly
Mm-hmm.
Americans, but there are other books out there that gives our history and so on. It's not that many. Street of Dreams. What is we got the guys who played at Central High School.
In high school.
Books
Mm-hmm.
are important. And one of the things we need to do is emphasize many of these African American writers and people who write about local history conditions because a lot of us have these stories in our head. And I cannot begin to tell you the number of people say they wish they would have interviewed their grandmothers and grandfathers to learn about this community and
Mm-hmm.
elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Do that. So, by the
Mm-hmm.
way, have you ever done any of the genealogy thing? Has anybody ever talked to you about any of that in terms of this issue?
Yeah, people have, but I've never taken the time or have the time, quite frankly, to really dive into that. But to your point about the historical context about our community in North Omaha, I really would like to see someone really do that with the historical mind that's of the community. And I say that because if you get someone who cannot reach out and have someone who has the lived experience of living in 24th Street when all that happened, I don't know that the story comes off with much richness. And I learned by doing that interview, and I'm just going to be transparent with Flatwater Free Press. They didn't they didn't capture what I hoped they would capture, and so I told myself, and I reminded myself, the keepers of the history are the ones who should be telling the history, and so that will never happen again.
It reminds me of African culture. I lived in Botswana. You have people in the village who knew the history. And
Mm-hmm.
some of them were illiterate. They didn't write per se, but they knew their background, their tribal groups, who was where, and so on. And so it's very important, particularly where I was at, to know your history, how you evolved, some of the positive and negative. So
Mm-hmm.
it's repeated
Mm-hmm.
to kids
Mm-hmm.
around fires and different places they interact with. One thing that I think is critical for this conversation, I think is important, is why did you get involved in Native Omaha? What was your main drive? Because I think when I started reading books about Omaha and stuff, having been
Mm-hmm.
here all my life, even though I was born in Hastings, I have a
Mm-hmm.
sense of appreciation, a sense of affinity, because I never got that in my formal education, either
Mm-hmm.
elementary school or college or secondary school. But I read about the great things that Black people have done in this city, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
discovering this something late in life, even though I've taught these courses. I'm kind of overjoyed by it and just make me feel a sense of pride. So my question back to you is why do you do it and what got you so wrapped up into this event. Again, I guess volunteer work for a lot of the work.
Hmm.
But what
Hmm.
was your aha moment, or and sometimes in church circles, what was your epiphany that got you
Right.
to the surface?
So just seeing, like I mentioned, growing up and being a part of Native Omaha Days as a kid to a young adult to, where I am now, just seeing how they built the camaraderie in North Omaha with just these events. And so from afar, I would see who the members were, but it was almost like it was a secret society. How do you get in? Who do you talk to? And you're so enamored with all the fun that you forget that part until it's over. Well, one of my friends that I went to high school with, her mom, Miss Fran Howard, who I call Mama Fran, was a member. And I got the guts one day and I asked her, and she said, "Here's what you need to do." And it was a long pause between the application and the interview. And I thought, I'm not going to get in. These people, they know folks, they move around this way, they're older, all the things, and I felt like I wasn't ready. But at that time, I was ready, and I wanted to be a part of something so historical, especially because it was founded by two Black women. I wanted to be a part of that and continue the cycle of this cultural heritage that we have. And then now my responsibility and the other members' responsibility is to reach back and grab some more young adults so we can continue the history of Native Omaha Days.
We
So
have a question in the chat. It
okay.
says, are there new themes or goals you focus on compared to past years?
Absolutely. So one of them, as I mentioned earlier, is getting young adults involved, giving them the history behind the why Native Omaha Days, but most importantly, the why behind the Native Omahans Club and paying respect to our founders. Also bringing us up into modern times, being able to get the data necessary to show how important we are when we spend our dollars just for that week, and connecting those dots to other individuals who can give or donate, whether that's their time, money, or resources to the Native Omaha Club. So those would have to say the two main things is making it more aware to the young adults so they can continue the legacy, and then ultimately being able to tell our story where it wraps back around to some economic empowerment within the club and we can give to our community.
Right. Now, this is kind of a sensitive question because I remember you talking about it. There of us different faiths, some of us with no faith, but I noticed you're doing something related to one of the local churches. Talk to me a little about why that's important and where you're doing that at.
Yeah, so the Gospel Fest in the archives was stated to be the most admired event by our two founders, Miss Betty McDonald and Miss Vera Johnson. And the reason why that is so important is because it is the ability for us to be in a safe place to fellowship and worship together. That is the sounding board for the rest of the week. So when you start an event with the idea that we are connected in some way, building a relationship, and we're in a sacred place, such as Salem Baptist Church, to where our Gospel Fest will be held on Wednesday, July 30th at Salem Baptist Church. That's our ability to really set the tone with how do we want this week to go. And so that's why it's so important is gives us the ability to fellowship, love on one each other, and kick off the celebration.
As you mentioned that, I'm reminded of my experience. I always go back to the continent because at the age of 21 in the Peace Corps, it was like a transformation. The best I can describe it to people was like a religious conversion
Yeah.
around the majority with African folks who, again, had your back and they, again, understand the issue of unity and the sense of collectiveness through language and elsewhere. But
Mm-hmm.
that I knew is that oftentimes before the chief or the head woman, whoever is in charge, started
Mm-hmm.
the meeting and the gathering of the kotla, they would start off with either a prayer or some
Yeah.
saying, a proverb,
Mm-hmm.
which would ground it. And then the other thing that was fascinating, I picked this up from a guy who was at one of the local churches who interact with Sudanese and African Americans and whites. And he said to a group, remember this, I promise, he says, as the leader of the church or the pastor, I wait to the very end to talk because I want everybody to have a chance to communicate and I don't want my words to influence them. And I wish more people would do that who are chairs and so on, because I've been in many groups where we don't ground ourselves. And secondly, we don't have a driven theme or focus, therefore
Mm-hmm.
become discombobulated or, we start to Mandarin in different areas or we become as we are now, fragmented in some areas. So
Right.
I know how
Right.
important it is to be grounding yourself with a commonality. And there's things that we agree upon, as you know, there's things
Mm-hmm.
we have to talk about. We already know we're on the same page because we come to live the experience of growing up in our communities where we've been nurtured by folks who are
Mhm.
Afrocentric or Black or wherever we want to come from.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's very important, I think, because it's a to me that's a genuine connection.
Right.
You know, it's a genuine connection. If you're there, you're probably operating on a sense of calmness and peace, like I am. And so that's what we want it to be. And that's what our founders would want. The violence that happens, and we can't control any of that, but at
Right.
least we've set the stage where we want this to be an event that is safe for everyone and have a good time and go back to your respective places until we meet again. And that's what that Gospel Fest message sends.
You know, as you were mentioning that whole issue of violence, we got to talk more about that because I think some of our people refuse to go to some public places because the media overemphasizes in our communities. And
Absolutely.
many of us talk about if it bleeds, it leads in North Omaha, but areas
Mm-hmm.
in West Omaha, other suburban areas, they downplay it and say, well, it's a mental
Mm-hmm.
health case or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
In actual
Mm-hmm.
fact, we see that all the time. But
Mm-hmm.
I think is key to this conversation, and I want to come back to a little bit is how much money do you actually raise? Do people donate to the organization then? And then the other issue for you relate to that is, um, do you have paid workers in some of the stuff that you do? So basically, the donations during this week for you, and then are there paid workers you have to pay to get to do some things for you?
Yeah, so the donations, we're fortunate enough to have sponsors for this 2025 annual celebration. And I definitely want to uplift our sponsors. It has been Metro Community College, the Fort Omaha campus. The Commission on African American Affairs
Oh wait,
is
hold
one
on,
of
hold
our
on,
lead sponsors.
hold
Yeah.
on. You said when all the chaos is going on there, they're
Hmm.
sponsoring you?
Yeah, they sponsor. They're one of our top sponsors
That's
this
good
year.
news to hear that because
Yeah,
I know there's
yep.
some of the negativity out there painting. I know the positive one came out recently. They're on the right path, but yeah,
Hmm.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yes, and then Bold Alliance, which is Jane Cleave's organization, they are our other supporter. And then Senator Ashley Spivey, even though she's a senator, she cares enough to say out of her own purse, here, I want to support the Native Omaha Club. And so, and then of course the members, we by our donations that we give separately from our annual dues, we're able to sustain and give a very great upcoming Omaha Day celebration. And we do have to pay. I mean, we had to pay the violinists. We give a love offering to everyone involved with the Gospel Fest because we do believe talent is money. And we want to show you, it may not be, something elaborate, but we want to give you something as a token of our appreciation. And we have to pay the band, of course. So, um, yeah, so there's fees, and none of us get paid to do this. Is straight of our hearts
That's
and
good.
our time. Yeah.
You know, and Kimberly, what I really push is that I cannot begin to tell you the number of volunteer hours I've done. And sometimes they assume because you're an African American, do it for free, or
Hmm.
whatever your skill set is. And, you don't get a plumber for free, you don't get a carpenter for free. You got to do
Right.
that. But when we come to some of us helping our community, they think by virtue of who you are, you got to give. So I appreciate people getting paid to do stuff with their expertise. And sometimes I don't even go to rooms and meetings when they want me to volunteer because I got enough volunteer already chalked up over the years. Um,
And I'm sorry, I want to mention, I apologize. Katie White's and the Weiss Foundation is also one of our top sponsors. So
oh wow.
forgive me. So I'm looking at my list, and that those are our top sponsors. She's one of our top sponsors as well.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because again, sometimes we don't know who's doing stuff for folks, and again, it's nice
Hmm.
to give accolades or they say positive feedback to those people doing that.
Yes.
Any other questions of people out there, or any other questions for Facebook? It says there's a lot we don't know about the history of Omaha. Is there a history of a tour highlighting the Omaha heritage?
Yeah, so Mr. Preston Love is doing the memory walk of 24th Street, and then he's opening a visitor center. So all things related to that question, you can definitely tap in to him. And then also Mr. Eric Unin, the Great Plains Black Heritage Museum, can also give you information as well as the Omaha Star.
Okay, now the other one. When I asked the Native Club building, was the Native Club building on 24th? I always wanted to be a member. Great representation of the club. I knew when I walked in okay, somebody made a comment. I knew when I walked into the Native Omaha Club building on 24th, I always wanted to be a member. So that's just a compliment. That's
Yeah, yeah. We no longer have a brick and mortar, but we are working towards that. So that location on 24th and Laird is no longer our location, but we're definitely have aspirations to get another club back. Because you're right, during Omaha Days, you couldn't get in that club. It was just unheard of. I mean, the line was so long, the club members and all of that. But once you got in, it was something amazing.
So there was actually a building called Native Omaha Club,
Yeah, on 24th and Laird.
and it's not there anymore.
It's not ours. The building is still there, but it's not our building anymore.
Is there writing still on the top that says Native Omaha there?
I think it's removed now.
Okay, because I kind of remember faintly then, but I didn't know if you guys are affiliated. You
Yeah.
know, one question that comes to mind is just kind of a random question. I'm sensitive to this, having been baptized by a feminist and someone who's a strong woman, either through my daughter, my late wife, or my mother who's late.
Mm-hmm.
How many men are in your group? In other words, I'm real sensitive being in a room with a bunch of chauvinistic, paternalistic men that help our community or don't help. So my question to you is, how many men participate? Not that I'm calling them out, but really I am. But
Mm-hmm.
men who are part of your board, are there
Yeah.
men
So
that
let me.
masculine, whatever, not the toxic masculinity, but are there men a part of this group that you're working on? Or working
There's 6 men that are part of the Native Omahans Club right now.
Okay, good. Because I'm also don't like to be in a room where they're all men, fat mouth, as a strong arm people sitting there talking about women's issues or whatever. Or even I've been in I taught a class in social work years ago, and I was talking about the black family. It was a class I was probably one of the only qualified person on staff to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I was talking
Mm-hmm.
about how we discipline our kids, and you know how we all joke about how our mom, dads hit us, and we
Yeah.
brag about it now, but back then we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
A young white female, blonde, blue-eyed co-ed said you should never touch your kid or something like that. And I,
Mm-hmm.
well, girlfriend, do you have any kids? No. Well, have you ever raised a black child? No. Do you know what our no? Anyway, end of conversation.
Yeah.
In other
Yeah.
words, you can't instruct us on how to raise our kids to prepare for some of these races or issues in our community. We have to prepare our kids to survive, and sometimes we have to give them tough love.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to talk about child raising and me. I'm not going to talk about childbirth because I never had a baby myself
Right.
through my
Right.
now. But as you say, it's better for you to tell those stories and be somewhat cryptic sometimes, but also somewhat blunt when somebody wants to get in
Mm-hmm.
your play.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very blunt. And I've learned and I've had some very good people in place that have helped me get through my career moves, and they often tell me you gotta taste it before you say it. And so I try to do that, but then there's sometimes that I give a little bit, I pay homage to that way of handling things. But then the only other way my dad would say is, you just tell them how it is, and you move away, and you let them know however that looks, whatever that looks like, that's what you do. So I'm trying to find the best of both worlds, but sometimes you do have to politely check people and smile.
We have not gone here, but one of the things that I had to wrestle with as a person who was working for a nonprofit, whether it be Catholic Charities, Promise Ship, Douglas County Administration, United Way, and my private life. And sometimes there was times I know at Catholic Charities, I was able to bring them together because it was part of their mission of the poor, helping diverse people, racial people, and also particularly when I worked in North and South Omaha, Latinos and African Americans. So
Mm-hmm.
I have a sensitive question to you is, and I know you've worked in different fields. Have you
Mm-hmm.
been able to integrate some of the things that you do with Native Omahas or your advocacy or your social justice in your workplace without getting into that bleeding area that you got to do your 8 to 5 at work? And it's a different question for many African Americans because we have dualities and pluralities of services that we have to do, especially those who get a little bit more formally educated. So my question to you basically is, can you blend that or have you blend that or is it demarcated in silos?
It's silo from a macro perspective. It is, but from a micro perspective, it isn't, because I am a Black woman, and I have lived experience as a Black woman. I've worked alongside many Black men that have lived experience that they have shared with me, and so because of that, my current organization, we pride ourselves on diversifying the advocates. Right, we want to make sure that at least we have every intentional effort that the advocates look like the population we serve. Will we ever max out to the full percentage? Probably not, because as Black people, we volunteer differently than other populations. And so, giving this idea of volunteerism at the high level of my current employer, you have to have someone who's really vested in doing that and also has the capital to donate this amount of time to serving children impacted by the child welfare system.
Uh,
And so we've done a great job of diversifying advocates in that vein, but we also are mindful that it's a difficult feat for us to be asked to volunteer with such a demanding position as a CASA.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't mention placing. And the reason
Yeah.
why that's important because some of us have to tiptoe. And what's wonderful is when you could be your present self and full embodied about what you're about, not only in your workplace, but even in your social life or in
Mm-hmm.
your home or your community. And some of us actually get hired because they want diversity. When we get inside these systems, we sometimes forget, we share these dual roles of representing our area
Mm-hmm.
geographically, our gender, whatever. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the thing that I find somewhat sad, and this is what we're going to have at the conference on October the 4th, is dealing with Black history and so on, is we got to help
Mm-hmm.
people young and old to understand there's people who've done a lot in our community. We stand on their shoulders, and that it didn't start with Black Lives Matters, and it isn't one personality, the cult of the personality. It's about the people who were your neighbors who let you put your head on their shoulder, and just the kind of love that you said we show love to each other and it
Mm-hmm.
generate that positivity. Because who can be mad at somebody who comes at you with a sense of positivity when they showing you nothing but love or giving you something unless you got some mental health issues and you just were like that. But I think
Yeah.
it's very important to talk it off and be about it. As my sister like to
Mm-hmm.
say, don't talk about it, be about it, and
Mm-hmm.
more in our community. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
now we're down to last 8 minutes, but there's a couple of things that you shared that I think bears repeating and so on. The exact dates you didn't say the exact dates to start, and how do you determine when you start the event? Because I know it's a whole week. How do you go to that? When is it starting, and then how do you arrive at that date?
So it's always the last week of July into if it falls into the first Monday in August. And that's just been historical. That's how it's always been. It used to be a week-long celebration way back at the inception of Omaha Days. Our founders then changed it to the last Wednesday of July to that first Monday in August. That's how it used to be. But then when the organized committee, the collab happened again, it went back to the week longs, which is why it's July 28th to August 4th of this year.
I got a sister who's administrator in Georgia school, and I know they're starting like either this week or next week. So some people start a lot earlier. She's on
Mm-hmm.
a 11-month contract, but I know in
Mm-hmm.
other states they start a lot earlier than we do in terms of when you started. Now I do know people take vacations for that and so on. Do you take vacation yourself? Because I know you have
Did.
a full-time
I did.
job,
I
and it's
did. I
hard to do
took
a full-time job and do a Native Omaha week and sit at the office trying to do community business when you got to do your regular work job.
Right. Yeah, I definitely took it off. There would be no way with even though we have committees and I have shout out to the members of the club. They've done a phenomenal job of planning our signature events. But even though they are chairing it, it's still the mental. I'm thinking about, did I connect the dot here? Did we make sure the banner was like this for the sponsors? What's the script look like? And so I took the week off, not only for that, but because I'm going to need it. That morning I'm going to need to recuperate before I go back out into the elements, Audrey. I just can't. I'm not young no more. I don't have that type of juice. I don't.
As I say, once we get past a certain age, I'm 70. People say, "What? You 70?" I said, "No, I got that long look because I got beat up."
Right, right.
But the issue I think for us is to have work-life balance, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we don't have that in our private lives or in our social lives or in our work life.
Absolutely.
And the more you do that, the longer you can deal with longevity. And again, you and I come from the world of marathoners and long distance runner because I just amazed the number of people who we know who drop out and they become
Mm-hmm.
involved in
Mm-hmm.
dysfunctional behaviors or things
Mm-hmm.
they know better and they were schooled like we were schooled through our
Mm-hmm.
fathers and mothers and aunts and uncles and cousins,
Mm-hmm.
the straightened path and so on. We're about to down to the last few minutes, but I want to ask you one last question before I let you make some closing comments. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what is the goal for, let's say, next year and the following year? How do you determine the things that you do in each given year? Because you mentioned the strategic planning and a process at some point, I think in a previous conversation we had, but what's going to happen, let's say, 4 or 5 years from now from your vantage point?
4 or 5 years from now, from my vantage point, I think we have a very strong young adult base that can help us execute Native Omaha Days. We've not done a good job with doing that and conveying the history of Omaha Days. So the hope is that once we create the excitement, we can have some young adults that can go and do some of the AI work. The thing is that I'm like, I don't have time to learn that. So just really getting the young adults involved so they can help us execute the next 2 to 3, 4, whatever Native Omaha Days, and we can take a back seat.
Right, right, right. One of the things that you alluded to, and I think it's probably key, is that we have to have means of communication among ourselves because again,
Yes.
we don't have, and some of us who are older, we're not good savvy with the internet. Some of us
Hmm.
don't do a text message. Leo gave me a
Hmm.
lecture one day, but I was going to start writing them long, hot letters. You can maybe write a letter or text instead of that, get my attention or people's attention quicker. But
Right.
we got to figure out if we're going to do intergenerational. And I
Yeah.
with my son sometime, he may not answer the
Mhm.
phone, but when I text,
Yeah.
him, respond quickly.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah.
again, we got
Yeah.
to learn the
I'm
modalities
like that too, though.
the
Yeah.
generations, like, and some of us are old school. We want to talk on the phone, run our
That
mouth
ain't
all
me.
day because it's my social life. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. So, but very, very important to deal with these issues. So, but Kim, I
Yeah.
really appreciate you coming on the show and talking. Like I say, this is going to be on Facebook Live for folks who want to see it within a month, and then of course we'll have it posted on Moore's
Okay.
website, and
Okay.
people can go back and watch it later because people are coming into town, and some people are amazed at how much progress we've made in communication and talking about some of our own indigenous issues.
Hmm.
African Americans or blacks, and again, obviously,
Hmm.
many of the newcomers from Africa, the Somalis, the Sudanese,
Yes, absolutely.
and so we want to make them feel a part of the family. And
Hmm.
it's part of us being the kind of people we are in this
Yeah.
community where strangers show you love and you're like, okay. And by the way, one of the little shameless plug I'm going to make is
Hmm.
next week going to have Adam Fletcher Sass, who's a white
Okay.
Canadian, is going to talk about all the folks who he impacted his life, as well as the history of some Black Omahans, artifacts, buildings, and things. And I learned a lot from reading this book, but it goes back to this issue of what we're doing. Last point, we did not talk about Stone Soul Picnic, and I know that
Yeah.
you met at the previous. Can you briefly say what that was about, and then how it evolved into Native Omaha Day?
So Stone Soul Picnic was derived because when the very first event done in August of 1977 was a picnic by our founders, only 15 people attended. And so as each year planned, it grew bigger and bigger, and it ended up becoming the Stone Soul Picnic at Carter Lake, which was that Saturday. People would get there early in the morning before the parade and go after the parade, and you would just hang out there until the Native Omaha Days or even a dance, and even past that. And so that's how the origination was the first event was done by our founders, was a picnic, and it evolutionized to the Stone Soul Picnic.
Yeah, good. Well, on that note, I'd like to say, folks, we are going to close this out. Kimberly, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
appreciate you. One quick point. We're going to have Rochelle Tucker coming up on the 6th talking about the
Ooh,
Black college tours and stuff. We have not talked about that before. She's also a board member. Mia Crawford Gray is going to talk about some issues related to education and how we back
nice.
to an OPS and again, bring knowledge. People going back to school in August, so we do that. And also, we're looking to have somebody from the health community. I got a
Mm,
couple of folks I'm looking at, either medical doctors, talk about cancer, different things we can do with prevention. And then my son, Poto, is an African American attorney and some of the challenges he faced. And we're going to have a major meeting on the 19th of August about the legal desert. We got some of the major organizations like Legal Aid,
wow.
Appleseed, Voice of the Children, you name it, the Nebraska Bar Association, ACLU. We're going to talk about a listening session about why we have such a desert in terms of legal issue. So again, those are things we want people to come to related to the
Mm.
conversation. And so appreciate you being here. And again, I just want to say, hopefully we can have you back again to talk more about what happens after a Native Omaha
Would
Day.
love that. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to educate people on exactly what Native Omaha Days is about and how it began. So,
Well, thank
all
you.
right.
Well, hope you enjoyed this edition of Throwing Down Some Heavy Light. As we always end, may the force be with you. Baroko.